Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. She was already running when the path curved. Not jogging, not exercising. Running the way people run when something behind them has weight and shape and a face they know. Her breath came in fractured bursts, not following any rhythm her body had planned. Her jacket was too light for the dropping temperature, the kind of detail that told you she hadn't chosen to be outside. She'd fled. There was a difference, and anyone who had ever seen real fear could read it immediately. She broke onto the main walking trail of Alton Baker Park, and her foot caught the edge of the gravel, sending her stumbling 2 steps before she recovered. Her eyes moved constantly, left, right, behind her, ahead, never landing anywhere long enough to feel safe. She saw the man on the bench, and something in her, some exhausted, desperate, half-broken instinct made a decision before her mind could talk her out of it. She ran straight toward him. Jack Thompson had been sitting on that worn wooden bench for 40 minutes. 45 years old, retired U.S. Navy SEAL. His coffee sat beside him, long cold, entirely forgotten. His hands rested on his knees, not relaxed, but controlled. The particular stillness of a man who has learned that the world does not always reward movement. To anyone passing by, he looked like someone simply resting. But Jack Thompson was never simply resting. His eyes had registered her the moment she appeared between the trees. The uneven footfall, the fractured breathing, the way her shoulders stayed pulled up and forward even as she ran, braced, not loose. Fear like that didn't come from imagination, it had a source. She reached him without slowing, cleanly, one hand catching his sleeve, fingers closing around the fabric with the grip of someone who had nothing else left to hold. "Please," the word came out barely holding its shape. "Please help me." Jack looked at her then, not at her words, at everything words don't say. The tremble moving through her fingers, the way her eyes flinched when a branch cracked somewhere in the trees behind her, the shallow way she was breathing, like someone who had been running for much longer than the length of this park. "Who's coming?" he asked, quiet, level. Her lips parted, a breath. Then, "My father-in-law." Her voice dropped lower, almost below sound. "He hurts me. I ran. I didn't know where else to go." Jack didn't move toward her, didn't offer comfort immediately, didn't fill the space with reassurance that might not be true yet, but he didn't pull away either. And in that moment, that was the most important thing he could have done. Her name was Elena. He didn't know that yet, but he would come to understand in the hours that followed that her whole life had been built on the particular skill of surviving people who should have protected her. She had been left outside an orphanage at 5 months old, no note that explained anything, no reason that could be located or understood. What followed were years inside different houses with different last names, and the same quiet lesson delivered over and over in the language of departure and temporary belonging, that she was someone people could leave. She learned to take up less space, to agree more than she believed, to make herself easy enough to keep that no one would feel burdened by the keeping. Then she met Daniel Cross. He had looked at her like she was permanent, like she was something worth the inconvenience of staying. She had married him with the particular gratitude of someone who had never expected to be chosen, and for 3 years she had been genuinely, almost disbelievingly happy. Then Daniel got sick. Quietly at first, then completely, and then he was gone. What came after arrived slowly, so slowly that Elena kept renegotiating what was normal. Walter Cross, her father-in-law, had begun with grief, then blame, wrapped in the language of grief so it was hard to separate the two, then something that wore the mask of concern while doing the work of control. Each month the line moved slightly, each time she adjusted, until one afternoon she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. She had tried leaving twice. He had found her both times. This time she had simply run, no plan, no bag, no destination, because standing still had finally become more terrifying than the unknown. She was still standing with her fingers around Jack's sleeve when the leaves shifted behind her. Rex came back through the trees. Not playfully, not with the loose energy of a dog returning from a game. He moved with his head lower than usual, steps deliberate, body carrying the taut, directed energy of an animal who had already assessed something his human hadn't yet seen. He was a German shepherd of uncommon size, deep black and tan, chest broad, eyes carrying something that went beyond alertness into what could only be called judgment. Elena heard him first, turned, and froze. He was moving directly toward her, large, controlled, unhurried. "He won't hurt you," Jack said quietly. She held her breath. Rex reached her, and then past her, so close she felt the shift of air against her hip. His eyes weren't on her at all. They were already past her, fixed on something further down the path. His body lowered fractionally, not threatening, but set, the way something immovable prepares itself without announcing it. Walter followed Rex's line of sight. 3 figures were approaching through the fading afternoon light. The man in front moved with the measured, quiet authority of someone accustomed to being believed. 60s, silver-haired, well-dressed in the way that communicates respectability before a single word is spoken. His face arranged into something that looked almost like relief. Walter Cross. 2 younger men flanked him slightly behind, less polished, more useful. Walter's eyes found Elena first, then moved to Jack with an expression of practiced, patient concern. "There you are," he said warmly, almost relieved. "You had everyone so worried." Elena's grip on Jack's sleeve tightened until her knuckles changed color. "He's lying," she whispered. Walter continued as though she hadn't spoken, his voice carrying the gentle sorrow of a grieving man doing a difficult thing. "She hasn't been herself since we lost my son," he explained calmly. "She's been struggling. We're just trying to bring her home safely." It was smooth, reasonable, the kind of explanation that works on people who weren't trained to watch what the body does while the mouth is speaking. Jack stood. Not quickly, not aggressively, just up. That single shift of geometry changed the entire architecture of the space between them. His posture said nothing that could be quoted and everything that needed to be understood. Rex moved with him, no command, no hesitation, repositioning forward, placing himself between Elena and the 3 men, like a door quietly, finally closing. Walter's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "You don't understand the situation," he said, the warmth thinning at the edges now. "This doesn't concern you." From behind Jack, Elena's voice came out barely above breath. "Please, don't let them take me." Jack didn't turn, but he shifted his weight, 1 half step back, placing himself fully, squarely between her and them. No speech, no explanation, just a line drawn in the space between 2 people. A line that said everything without saying a word. One of the men behind Walter stepped forward, jaw tight with the impatience of someone used to doors opening when he pushed them. "That dog needs to be on a leash," he muttered. "He makes that call," Jack said. The man forced a short laugh, the kind used to communicate ease while feeling none. He took another step forward, hand moving slightly outward. What happened next lasted less than 1 second. Rex's head snapped, a single surgical movement, jaws closing in the empty air an inch from the man's hand. No contact, just the clean, sharp snap of teeth meeting with nothing between them. A message, not an attack. The man lurched backward so hard he nearly lost his footing, swearing under his breath. The second man went completely still. Walter didn't move his feet. But something shifted behind his eyes. The calculation became briefly visible, just long enough to confirm what it was, before the composed mask settled back into place. Jack looked at him steadily. "She said no." That was all. No raised voice, no threat elaborated, just 4 words spoken with the full, immovable weight of a man who had already decided where he stood and had absolutely no interest in moving. The silence that followed had a texture to it. Then, faintly, at the edge of hearing, a siren. Distant, but directional, getting closer. One of the men glanced back over his shoulder without meaning to. The other shifted his weight toward the tree line. Walter held his ground 2 seconds longer than either of them, long enough to make it feel like a choice rather than a retreat. "This isn't finished," he said. But the authority was already gone from his voice. What remained was something smaller and colder, the residue of a man realizing, for perhaps the first time, that a room had changed around him without his permission. He turned, the others followed. Rex held his position, watching the empty trail, ears forward, body still, until the last sound of their footsteps dissolved entirely into the ambient quiet of the park. Only then did his shoulders drop. Only then did the tension leave his body, slowly, like something exhaled after being held too long. Jack's apartment was quiet in the way safe places are quiet, a different quality of silence than emptiness. Elena sat on the edge of the couch, hands close to her body, fingers moving slightly without purpose, like they didn't know what to do without urgency directing them. Rex settled nearby, not across the room, not at the door. He came and lay down directly at her feet, his large body warm against her shoes, his chin resting on his front paws, his eyes open and steady and entirely certain about where he had chosen to be. Elena looked down at him. Something in her face changed. Not dramatically, just shifted. The way a person's expression changes when they realize unexpectedly that they are not alone. Her hand moved slowly downward. Her fingers found the top of his head, and Rex, this dog who had stood like a wall between her and 3 men without making a sound, leaned into her hand, just slightly, just enough. Elena's breath caught. She pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling, blinking hard, trying to hold something back that had clearly been waiting a very long time to come out. Jack said nothing. He poured coffee and set it near her without ceremony and gave her space, because some people need the room around them honored before they can begin to speak. After a long while, she did. "My husband's father kept a locked drawer in his study. He always said it was financial records." A pause. "I always believed him." She looked at her hands.
After tonight, I think I need to see what's inside it." Jack sat with that for a moment, turned it over carefully, the weight of it, the line it represented, and the consequences that lived on the other side. This wasn't a mission with rules of engagement. This was civilian life with real legal edges and real human consequences. But he thought about Walter's eyes in that park and what lived behind them, and he went. The house was still when they entered, the particular stillness of a place where something has been hidden for a long time. Rex moved differently inside, slower, nose lower, reading the air in long, deliberate pulls. He stopped near the study door, sat down, didn't bark, didn't scratch, just waited. Jack opened the drawer, folders first, papers, nothing visible. Then beneath them, a bundle held together with a rubber band so old it had hardened and cracked along one side.
Letters, dozens of them, all addressed the same way. Elena's name, written in handwriting he didn't recognize. Careful, slightly slanted. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who chose their words slowly. He picked up the first one, read 3 lines. His jaw tightened. He read another and another, each one different in date, spanning years, but carrying the same content, the same search, the same voice looking across years of silence for the same person. When Elena saw them, she didn't reach for them immediately. Her hands hovered over the pile, trembling slightly, like touching them might prove them to be something other than real. She picked up the first letter, read it again. Her breathing changed at the edges, not breaking yet, just altering, the way breathing changes when the body realizes it is being asked to hold something it was never prepared to carry. She picked up the second letter. By the third, her hand was shaking. By the 6th, she couldn't read anymore. She pressed the page against her chest, both arms folding over it, holding it there, and made a sound that had no clean name. Not quite crying, something older and deeper. The sound of a person discovering that the loneliness they had carried for their entire life was not the truth. It was a construction, built carefully, maintained deliberately, by the man whose name was on the arrest warrant being filed at that exact moment across town. Rex crossed the room without being asked. He pressed himself against her legs, not gently but firmly, his full weight leaning into her, steady, unmovable, like he was lending her something solid to press back against. Elena bent forward over him, both arms going around his neck, face pressed into his fur, and she wept. Not the quiet, controlled kind, the real kind. The kind that comes when years of wrong belief finally break open all at once, and the grief and the relief arrive together in the same wave, and there is no way to separate them. Rex didn't move, didn't pull back, didn't shift. He just held still and let her. Jack stood in the doorway of that room and looked at the two of them, the woman folded over the dog carrying her weight without complaint, and he felt something in his chest that he didn't have a clean word for either. He turned away quietly and gave them the room. "She was looking for me," Elena said later. Her voice was rough and thin. She was looking at the letters spread across the table, all of them now, organized by date, the full shape of it visible. All of this time she was looking. Jack sat across from her. "He told her I didn't want her." Her voice broke on the last word. "I thought no one came. My whole life, I thought no one came." He shook his head once. They came. What followed was not a single dramatic moment. It was weeks,
Careful, patient weeks. Phone calls, legal involvement, Elena remembering small details she hadn't realized mattered, a locked account number, dates that didn't align with what she'd been told, records that contradicted the story Walter had constructed and maintained for years. Walter Cross was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The truth came out in pieces, not all at once, not cleanly, but completely. And when it was over, the world didn't suddenly feel light, but it felt possible, and that was something Elena hadn't felt in a long time. The first time her mother stood in the doorway, neither of them moved.
The woman was in her 60s, small, silver-haired, eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has looked for something for so long that hope and grief had become the same feeling. She had driven through the night. She hadn't asked if it was convenient. Elena stood 6 feet away from her and couldn't close the distance. Too many years, too many mornings waking up believing she had been unwanted. Too much life lived inside a story someone else had written and locked in a drawer. Her mother's voice broke first. "I looked for you," she whispered. "I never—" She stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth, started again. "I never stopped." Elena's knees bent slightly, not falling, but giving way in the way that happens when the last thing holding you upright is finally no longer necessary. "I thought you didn't want me," she said. "I thought you didn't want me," her mother answered. They moved toward each other imperfectly, arms reaching before feet had fully closed the distance, and held on with the particular desperation of people who understand, finally and completely, what it means to have almost lost something forever over a lie someone else told. Rex, who had been watching from across the room with his chin on his paws, stood slowly, walked to where they stood, and pressed himself gently against both of them, his warm flank leaning into Elena's leg, his head tilting against her mother's hand. Just there, steady, like he had decided quietly and completely that this was where he belonged. The shelter came from Elena's idea. It started small, a rented space, a second-hand couch, a handwritten sign on the door. Not a place to hide, a place to begin. They built it carefully, with the kind of attention that comes from people who understand what it costs to start over with nothing. People came in ones and twos, then more, broken in different ways, quiet in different ways. Elena never pushed anyone to speak before they were ready. Jack never asked questions that weren't his to ask.
And Rex simply stayed. There was a girl, 7 years old, who arrived one morning holding her mother's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't spoken in 11 days. The counselors were patient and skilled and kind, and none of it had reached her yet. On her 3rd day at the shelter, she saw Rex lying near the window in the afternoon light. She crossed the room alone, slowly, watching his face the entire way. Rex didn't look up, didn't turn his head, didn't make a sound, just waited. She sat down beside him on the floor, put her small hand on his side, felt him breathe in, out, and for the first time in 11 days, she exhaled all the way down. That evening, she said 2 words to her mother, just 2, but they were the first ones. One evening, Jack stood outside the shelter as the light faded over Eugene. Rex sat beside him, shoulder pressed warm against Jack's knee, in the easy way he had when the world felt, for the moment, manageable. Through the lit windows, voices moved softly, ordinary, alive. Elena came to stand beside them. "I thought I had nothing," she said. Jack looked at the light in the windows. "And now?" She was quiet for a moment. "Now I know I was wrong." A breath. "I just needed someone who wouldn't walk away." Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to.
Because real courage was never loud. It didn't arrive with announcements or speeches or the right words prepared in advance. It arrived as an uneven set of footsteps coming down a park path, as a grip on a sleeve, as a dog who read a moment before any human did and moved without being told. It arrived as a decision, quiet, ordinary, entirely personal, to stay when leaving would have been so much easier. Some people don't save lives with noise. They save them by simply refusing to look away. If you believe that one act of quiet courage can change the entire direction of a life, subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales. Every story we tell is a reminder that the greatest things rarely announce themselves. They happen in ordinary places, between ordinary people, when one of them simply decides not to walk away. Subscribe and carry that reminder with you.